You know, submission oftentimes gets a bad rap because people really feel like they have to give up so much of themselves in order to submit to someone or something. And we really don't understand the beauty that it is in submitting to God and submitting to His plan and accepting what it is that He has and understanding that we don't know the best for ourselves all the time. Sometimes we have to go through some difficulties and go through God's plan in order to really realize all that we have for us. He has for us. And so today we are studying submission through the lens of Jacob and understanding what it really was for him to be submitted to the instructions that were given to him by his parents, and then to also wait on the Lord. And this is a long wait. So we're going to learn how to wait well tonight and talk about Jacob's submission. So, good people, welcome to Bible study. Let's jump right into it. Per usual, we are going to read all the way through. We are in Genesis 29. I'm reading from the NLT version. We're going to read the chapter all the way through, and then we are going to take it from the top and break it down verse by verse and just get into some nitty gritty. I will share whatever Holy Spirit shares with me, and hopefully, this just brings more understanding to the concept that the Bible is really trying to teach us. I love understanding the themes of the Bible and the themes of the things that we're sharing. And so that's what we're doing tonight. So let's jump over here. We have Genesis 29. Again, this is the NLT version. So it reads Jacob arrives in Padan Aram. Then Jacob hurried on, finally arriving in the land of the east. He saw a well in the distance. 3 flocks of sheep and goats lay in an open field beside it, waiting to be watered, but a heavy stone covered the mouth of the well. It was the custom there to wait for all the flocks to arrive before removing the stone and watering the animals. Afterward, the stone would be placed back over the mouth of the well. Jacob went over to the shepherds and asked, "Where are you from, friends?" "We are from Haran," they answered. "Do you know a man there named Laban, the grandson of Nahor?" he asked. "Yes, we do," they replied. "Is he doing well?" Jacob asked. "Yes, he's well," they answered. "Look, here comes his daughter Rachel with the flock now." Jacob said, "Look, it's still broad daylight, too early to round up the animals. Why don't you water the sheep and goats so they can get back out to pasture?" "We can't water the animals until all the flocks have arrived," they replied. Then the shepherds moved the stone from the mouth of the well, and we water all the sheep and goats. Jacob was still talking with them when Rachel arrived with her father's flock, for she was a shepherd. And because Rachel was his cousin, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and because the sheep and goats belonged to his uncle Laban, Jacob went over to the well and moved the stone from its mouth and watered his uncle's flock. Then Jacob kissed Rachel, and he wept aloud. He explained to Rachel that he was her cousin on her father's side, the son of her aunt Rebekah. So Rachel quickly ran and told her father Laban. As soon as Laban heard that his nephew Jacob had arrived, he ran out to meet him. He embraced and kissed him and brought him home. When Jacob had told him his story, Laban exclaimed, "You really are my own flesh and blood." Jacob marries Leah and Rachel. After Jacob had stayed with Laban for about a month, Laban said to him, "You shouldn't work for me without pay just because we are relatives. Tell me how much your wages should be." Now Laban had 2 daughters. The older daughter was named Leah, and the younger was named Rachel. There was no sparkle in Leah's eyes, but Rachel had a beautiful figure and a lovely face. Since Jacob was in love with Rachel, he told her father, "I'll work for you for 7 years if you give me Rachel, your younger daughter, as my wife." "Agreed," Laban replied. "I'd rather give her to you than to anyone else. Stay and work with me." So Jacob worked 7 years to pay for Rachel, but his love for her was so strong that it seemed to him but a few days. Finally, the time came for him to marry her. "I have fulfilled my agreement," Jacob said to Laban. "Now give me my wife so I can sleep with her." So Laban invited everyone in the neighborhood and prepared a wedding feast. But that night, when it was dark, Laban took Leah to Jacob, and he slept with her. Laban had given Leah a servant Zilpah to be her maid. But when Jacob woke up the next morning, it was Leah. What have you done to me? Jacob raged at Laban. I worked 7 years for Rachel. Why have you tricked me? It's not our custom here to marry off a younger daughter ahead of the firstborn, Laban replied. But wait until the bridal week is over, then we'll give you Rachel too, provided you promise to work another 7 years for me. So Jacob agreed to work 7 more years. A week after Jacob had married Leah, Laban gave him Rachel too. Laban gave Rachel a servant, Bilhah, to be her maid. So Jacob slept with Rachel too, and he loved her much more than Leah. He then stayed and worked for Laban the additional 7 years. Jacob's many children. When the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he enabled her to have children, but Rachel could not conceive. So Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben, for she said, "The Lord has noticed my misery, and now my husband will love me." She soon became pregnant again and gave birth to another son. She named him Simeon, for she said, "The Lord heard that I was unloved and has given me another son." Then she became pregnant a third time and gave birth to another son. He was named Levi, for she said, "Surely this time my husband will feel affection for me, since I have given him 3 sons." Once again, Leah became pregnant and gave birth to another son. She named him Judah, for she said, "Now I will praise the Lord." And then she stopped having children. All right. So now we are going to switch over to the PowerPoint. Hopefully, that was a good sort of quick in and out overview of, you know, chapter 29. And I always like to read something through one time. It just kind of gets it in you just a little bit enough so you can understand what's going on in the story overall. But then you got to stop and go back. And that's how I read personally. I stop and go back to what I read and break it down like verse by verse to make sure, I'm understanding everything. So today we're talking about Jacob's submission, remember. So remember, verse 1 starts off and it says, "Then Jacob hurried on, finally arriving in the land of the east." Now, this is picking up immediately from chapter 28, which was explaining how Jacob's ladder, that whole situation when he fell asleep, and he had a vision, and he saw heaven open. He saw a ladder, and the angels were ascending and descending from the ladder, and the Lord was on top of the ladder. He spoke to Jacob and told Jacob, "If you follow me, you do these things, then I will bless you immensely. This will be your nation. You will be my people," like all that kind of stuff. So Jacob anointed that place and blessed it and worshiped God there. And so, he agreed, like, if the Lord does all these things for me, then yes, I will obey him. I will be true. So he was on a mission already. He only stopped so he could really go to sleep. And this is not saying that this just happened in a day. I'm pretty sure it took a few days for him to travel. It doesn't tell us really how he was traveling. If he had a donkey, did he have any type of camel? We really don't know. I'm assuming so. But at either rate, it says that he hurried on. So he was leaving from the place that he had camped at, he was heading east. Technically, it's like northeast a little bit because you kind of got to go north a little bit before you go east. But he was heading east and he was going to Haran, which we already looked at the map. So we're not looking at maps tonight. We're really just trying to understand the narrative that's taking place. But it's present day Iraq. Um, think of Tigris Euphrates River. He's going near that area. So it says he hurried on and finally arrived in the land of the east. So now he needs to figure out where he has to go specifically to find the household. His his parents instructed him, his dad told him to find his mother's brother. That's Laban, the mother's brother, and marry one of his daughters. He had very specific instructions, and you will see how Jacob follows those very specific instructions because they did not want him marrying one of the Canaanite slash Hittite women. They wanted somebody who had some sense and who essentially followed most of the customs and things of the land that Isaac's family came from, Abraham's family came from. So this is all Abraham's family. And we're going to kind of break it down a little bit. I didn't put the same like family tree, because we did that a lot of that last week. But remember, this is he's going to his uncle's house. So he saw a well in the distance. This is important because a well is going to be where people gather. So if he needs to find people, he's going to have to find a city, or he knows that they're going to be coming to a well. And depending on the time of day that he arrives, it's going to be time to water sheep, take water into the city, like do some things. Water was essential to survival. So finding a well, like identifying like, oh, that's where a well is, would be important for him to be on his mission. He's not going to wander around in the desert. He needs to go to where he knows people will be. So it just kind of gives you a summary of what was there. So it says 3 flocks of sheep and goats lay in an open field beside it, waiting to be watered. So this is 3 different people's flocks of sheep and goats. They all come together to this well to water their flocks. But a heavy stone covered the mouth of the well. Okay, so that's just important information. They're waiting. The stone is heavy. They're waiting to water at one time. It's just practical information. You probably could look it up to see what the well most likely look like. But the stone is heavy enough to where it probably takes multiple people to roll it away. Um, or, they just use their efforts like in a wise way. So like, why would we each go up here, roll the stone, unroll the stone to water our flocks instead of just doing it all at the same time? So it says it was the custom there. That means it's not necessarily a right or wrong. It's just the way that they did it there. It was a custom there to wait for all the flocks to arrive before removing the stone and watering the animals. Afterward, the stone would be placed back over the mouth of the well. It's just a custom. It's just how it is. And so that's just giving you a little bit of information prior to the story unfolding so you kind of understand better what's going on. So this is what Jacob is seeing. He's seeing a well in the distance. It's a stone over the well. It's 3 different groups of flocks that's waiting to receive water. So now he goes over to the shepherds and he asks them, "Where are you from, my friends?" Now Jacob don't know these people. My friends does not mean a personal relationship with these people. My friends is more of an endearing term to mean like I am friendly people. Like I am not your enemy. I am coming in peace. And so I just want to know like where you all are from because he knows he's on a mission to try to find some people, trying to find a particular place, and so he needs to know if they can help in their knowledge because obviously if you are a shepherd, you have knowledge of the area, you have knowledge of people who come and go, you kind of know. So he's asking the right people, and we have to learn how to do that in life. Just ask the right people. You don't have to know everything. You might have a mission, and now you need to inquire, you need to seek, and you need to find. We got to ask the right questions. We got to ask the right people. So they said, "We are from Haran." He asked, "Do you know a man there named Laban, the grandson of Nahor?" "Yes, we do," they replied. Like he's being very specific. He's not messing around. He's getting right to the point. Okay, where are you from? Okay, they're from where I need to go. Do you know this particular person, this particular household is really what he's asking for because he wants to know, do you know a man there named Laban, the grandson of Nahor? Now Nahor would have passed by then. That was Abraham's brother. Nahor would have died by then, but the household, that lineage would be known. And so Laban would be carrying on the lineage of his grandfather because that is the the main thing. I hope we understand that when we talk about last names, we're talking about like household. So like house of such and such. Because back then they may not have used last names, but they knew they had a surname, meaning that they knew whose family you were in by not just your name, but who your like ancestor was that's associated in that place that would have had a reputation, with those people. So, do you know this person who is of the household, who is of the lineage of who is surname essentially like a last name, Nahor. So that's why he's asking it that way, because people would know not just you, but like who your people are. That's why that spiritual inheritance that I talk about all the time is so important because had Nahor had a bad reputation, ain't nobody asking for him. So you have to be careful is what you're setting your children up for to be known and to be well known and to be liked. It's important when you live around people in community especially. Okay, so the question is he doing well? So Jacob he's getting some intel because Jacob wants to know where is he located, and most importantly, like, is he doing okay? Because Jacob knows he's coming in unannounced. If he's doing well, it kind of gives him a sign as to how he should approach. If he's not doing well, it would give him a different, amount of information so he knows how to approach the situation. So Jacob is really asking the right questions so that he can know how to finesse the situation. So they say, yes, he's well. Look, here comes his daughter, Rachel, with the flock now. Wow, what a coincidence. Just like, so Jacob's father is Isaac. Isaac's father is Abraham. Abraham sent a servant to Haran, same place, probably the same well, to find a wife for his son Isaac. That's how Rebecca came in the picture. The servant went to Haran to find a wife for Isaac. It's like sending your advisor to go and find a son for the prince, and I mean not find a son, find a wife for the prince. That's how important Abraham was. That's how large his household is. That's how rich he is. He could send somebody to go and find it. He didn't have to go do all those traveling and all that stuff by himself. So back to the story. Probably same well and everything. At that moment that he needs to find somebody and needs to locate somebody, at that moment, just like it was with the servant finding Rebecca at the well, here is Rachel coming. He could not have asked for better timing. There could not have been a better story for them to meet and for him to know ahead of time who she is, that her father is doing okay, and like this is the way that I can approach her. So it's like I'm sure a big relief when he's seeing her come. Like, oh, great! And so he's got time to kind of figure out what he's gonna do. So then he's still talking to the shepherds. He said, "Look, it's still broad daylight. Too early to round up the animals. Why don't you water the sheep and goats so they can get back out to pasture?" Because what Jacob is not understanding is why they're doing something different than what he may do in his custom back home. Remember, home is Beersheba. So what they say is we can't water the animals. That's an interesting word. Can't. They just don't. No, we don't water the animals is really what they probably should have said. Because it's a custom. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It's just how they do it. But they say we can't water the animals until all the flocks have arrived. Then the shepherds move the stone from the mouth of the well and we water all the sheep and goats. So they're explaining how it goes. So, okay, y'all wait until everybody has arrived. Looks like Rachel is arriving. Looks like enough. Let's um let's sort of move forward. So it says Jacob was still talking with them when Rachel arrived with her father's flock, for she was a shepherd. So they said, "Look, there's Rachel." And then he asked the question as they're answering and talking to him. She's coming up. And because Rachel was his cousin, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and because the sheep and goats belonged to his uncle Laban, Jacob went over to the well and moved the stone from its mouth and watered his uncle's flock. So this has nothing to do with him identifying Rachel as a wife right now. He recognizes familiarity as far as family, and he's really trying to make an impression. He knows that she's not going to know who he is, and she's going to want to know why he's there and what's this all about. What are these questions about? So because he's trying to show favor and he knows exactly who she is, he goes and he does a wonderful gesture for them to help them, do their jobs. They're trying to water their flocks. So he moves this stone. I don't know how heavy the stone is. I don't really know what the well looks like, but I'm sure it probably would take more than one person if this was not Jacob doing this. It probably would have took two of those guys to move that stone. But he goes and he moves it by himself because he's probably pumped up with adrenaline. He's probably excited. He's probably very relieved because he's finally arrived in the land and wanting to do something big and wanting to make a big gesture. He goes and he unrolls this stone. So it's kind of his introduction to her. Then he turns around and think of like a lavish moment is what is happening in my mind. Sometimes you just gotta imagine how this plays out. And so he moves this big old stone, nice strong arms, big old stone. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and he wept aloud. So it's like this grand gesture so he can sort of introduce himself. And I read that, wept aloud, and I'm like, wow, he was not afraid to show emotion because he, think of the journey that he had been on. Not only did he have to flee from his father's household because his brother was trying to kill him for stealing the birthright. Now you, or the blessing, excuse me. Now you have him in the wilderness, probably by himself, limited resources. He's going somewhere he's never been before. He's having to experience and leave all these things behind. It's probably a lot of emotions. Then he encounters God in a dream and a vision, and it's like a whole moment with God. And he's still on his journey. He's pushing forward. And you know how you finally get somewhere, and it's like, oh. And sometimes when you release and you let go, it lets all of this emotion out because it's so much you have probably been pent up for such a long time trying to get to the place that you wanted to be in. So he wept aloud. And that's a beautiful display because it's vulnerability. It's not showing him trying to boast in his like strength for rolling the stone away. He's trying to win favor. So, but it's genuine. So he kissed Rachel. That's a common greeting, and wept aloud. He explained to Rachel that he was her cousin on her father's side. Cousin, so that means somebody's related to, he knows, on my father's side. So that means to her, okay, somebody's related to my father. So it's a sibling, and you're their child. The son of her Aunt Rebecca. So that's specific so that she knows which person. Now, of course, Rachel is going to recognize that name so quickly. She's going to, even though she probably never met her aunt, she's going to very well know of her aunt because it's family lineage. Just because somebody moved away doesn't mean they never get talked about, doesn't mean you never discuss. I'm sure her name was well known because she had a great engagement story. The way that Rebecca was swooped off her feet and taken to out of Haran and over into uh, I forget where they were staying at the time. I think Beersheba might have been where Isaac was staying at the time. But taken to the land where Abraham and then Isaac was living, swept her off her feet and she's off. So I'm sure that story got recounted and retold because ever since then they haven't seen their sister. And so that story has to have been recounted and retold by Laban and her and their mother because she was also in that story. So then Rachel quickly ran and told her father Laban because she knows exactly. And it's like, what? You're this person? Oh, and she like takes off. We don't know what happened to the sheep and the goats. She's focused on the fact that like her family is in town. Like this is a big moment. It's a reunification. It's a reuniting. It's like a reunion happening, although it's not everybody. But that's important for them to know of the flesh and blood. That means your mother is probably well, like all things are well. She had children, like they're, kind of finding out some basically some information and putting puzzles together. Then as soon as Laban heard that his nephew Jacob had arrived, he ran out to meet him. So this is like a moment again, reunification, and they're excited. They want to. It's not bad blood. It's nothing like that. They want to meet and greet. They want to become close. They want to find out what's going on, and you want to support. So he's come to your place to, just like hospitality wise, he's come to your place, and you want to embrace him. So he embraced him, and kissed him, and brought him home. Now we need to understand that these are most likely kissing on the cheek. These are very friendly. This is not no homo stuff. This is the gesture of hospitality, gesture of love. It's pretty simple. Okay. So he brought him home with him. When Jacob had told him his story, Laban exclaimed, "You really are my own flesh and blood." So he is, not only did he introduce himself as this person, but he had to kind of give a background so that they have more context. And Laban really did confirm that yes, you are who you say you are. So we have to do the same thing when we're coming before people who may not know us, but maybe you have a reference or something like that. You need to kind of confirm how you know and how you're connected, and it helps people to really embrace you. So you really are my own flesh and blood. Now Jacob told him his story. This is important because a lot of people will say like, oh, like I saw I forget what it was called. It's like it's a newer series on Hulu, I think, and they're doing this beginning part of the Bible with the story of Hagar and Sarah. They did the story of it's not the Bible, it's Women of the Bible, I think is a series name. So they did Hagar and Sarah, they did Rebecca and Isaac, they did Rachel and Jacob. And when they got to the Rachel and Jacob story, I had to really stop watching because I'm like, y'all are literally making up pieces of the story. They made it seem like Jacob was deceitful. They made it seem like he was not true about who he was, and he was lying, trying to pretend like he was this rich person. He had all this his ownership of things, and he really wasn't who he said he was. But right here in the Bible, it say plain as day, when Jacob had told him his story, Laban explained, "You really are my own flesh and blood." So Jacob must have shared enough information with him for him to know exactly who he is and why he's coming there. Everybody can see that he's empty-handed. He's not coming with like gifts and things that would be normal. So he's got to tell him like what's going on and why he's sent there. So now we move on to Jacob marries Leah and Rachel. Same chapter, just different subsection, if you will. All right. And I said that story about the Women of the Bible series because we have to be very careful as to how we like fill in the blanks of stories in the Bible. Now you could say that it's creative license, but a lot of times they take those creative licenses too far to where you're almost saying something as if you know it to be true. That's where I have an issue with things like that. But I digress. So, after Jacob had stayed with Laban for about a month, Laban said to him, "You shouldn't work for me without pay just because we are relatives. Tell me how much your wages should be." So, we have Jacob who's coming into Laban's household. Jacob is younger, Laban is his uncle. But Jacob is working for Laban, he's contributing to the household. We need to do the same thing. I don't know why we have it to where people will come into someone's household and feel like you don't need to contribute. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to help out. No, you need to do a lot of things um, to help because that's you're a mouth to feed. You're giving you a place to stay. Like you need to pull your weight. So you shouldn't work for me without pay just because we are relatives. Tell me how much your wages should be. So they are having a negotiation moment. Hey, I want to pay you because that's fair. What should your wages be? Jacob says, now it says Laban had two daughters. The older one was named Leah, and the younger one was Rachel. Rachel, remember, is the one who had the flocks out to the pasture to water them. There was no sparkle in Leah's eyes, but Rachel had a beautiful figure and a lovely face. Now, it doesn't mean that Leah was ugly. It just means that she was not as attractive as Rachel. She may have been like a plain Jane, if you will. No sparkle in her eyes. It's nothing like truly attractive that just kind of makes you stop and look. You see her, but you don't stop and look and gaze or anything like that. Like it's a difference. But Rachel had a beautiful figure, body, and face. So since Jacob was in love with Rachel, he told her father. So he's known her for about a month. He's in love with Rachel. He acknowledges Leah, but that's not where his heart is. So he agrees, "I will work for you for 7 years if you'll give me Rachel, your younger daughter, as my wife." Now, this is what we would call indentured servitude, and this is definitely a biblical principle where you can loan yourself to somebody. If you're needing something that they have, you can essentially loan your work out, your chores, your ability to do labor to them for 7 years to earn whatever it is that you're trying to earn. That is definitely a thing that people did, everywhere. So it was a very common practice. Um, and so that's what he said. He said, "Hey, you don't gotta pay me nothing, but if you give me Rachel, then we even. So I'll do 7 years of work to earn Rachel." That's essentially how people would like pay a dowry. They would give gifts. They would pay money to the bride's family in order to have her. Because it's like when you are taking away somebody who can do like physical labor and earning money and work for a family, you kind of need to pay for that loss of labor and time and just like pay your work to make sure that this is a good situation, a good match. So Jacob is like, well, instead of us paying, we could do an exchange. I will give myself to you for 7 years, and I'll work for you, and then Rachel, we can be married. So Laban agreed. He said, "I'd rather give her to you than anyone else. Stay and work with me." Seems like a great situation. Seems cool. So Jacob worked for 7 years to pay for Rachel. Laban agreed. This is a verbal agreement. They probably shook on it. They did whatever it was to agree and keep your end of the agreement. But his love for her was so strong that it seemed to him but a few days. See how he submitted himself to the process? So you have him coming from Beersheba. His parents told him to go there and marry one of your mother's daughters. Stay there until I send for you to come home. So here is Jacob. This is a 7 year period that is describing is passing by right here. And this, but his love for her was so strong that it seemed to him but a few days. It was him submitting and accepting what he needed to do and take care of, and he's going forth with whatever it is that he's been assigned to do. He's not fighting it. He's not saying, "Oh, it's not fair that I have to go because he want to be crazy and try to kill me." He's moving forward with his life. At this point, Jacob is over 40 years old because he was 40 like 3 chapters ago. So he's probably, I don't know, 41, 42 or something by then. By now, I don't know. But 7 years later, he's got to be close to 50 because he's working for 7 years before he marries Rachel. Because then it says finally the time came for him to marry her. Well, what was the time? Well, remember it was 7 years. So 7 years has passed by, so now he can marry her because he says, I have fulfilled my agreement. What was the agreement? To work for 7 years to pay for Rachel. And Jacob said to Laban, now give me my wife so I can sleep with her. Now, this is where we get up in a tizzy because we try to apply our modern day approach to dating to the Bible. Well, it should be the other way around. If you sleep with someone, it is a marriage. That is how they consummate a marriage. It's not just a ceremony where you kiss. The consummation has to happen in order for it to be a spiritual marriage. So this is important. You just don't sleep with anybody. You are you are you are saying that this is a marriage bed. That's where the whole concept of like a marriage bed comes from. And you're saving yourself for that moment. So Jacob is like, okay, well, I did my 7 years. It's time for me to be married to her. So Laban invited everyone in the neighborhood and prepared a wedding feast. So of course the wedding feast is appropriate. It's a celebration. Everybody gets to celebrate, what's about to happen, and they know that that night it means a consummation is taking place. It's a very normal, natural thing. But that night, when it was dark, Laban took Leah to Jacob and he slept with her. Now, of course, it's dark outside. You can't see anything. It's not like we have lights to turn on. I mean, they probably had a lamp, but this is an intimate moment. You're not trying to necessarily see in that way. You can feel your way through and you can figure out what you're doing. So he didn't need like the light in that way to see. So Laban, instead of taking Rachel, takes Leah to Jacob. And it tells us some information that's going to be important for next week because it's a different chapter where these people come in. But it says Laban had given Leah a servant, Zilpah, to be her maid. So it's kind of like a 2 for 1. Once you take Leah, you can take Zilpah, not as a wife, but you would Leah. I hate to say it like this, but it's basically Zilpah is her lifelong servant, her maid. So she is with her. She owns her in the sense of how we would think of like a slave, not in a mistreatment way, but like that is her life. Is She is meant to and designed to serve Leah. So that is who Zilpah is to her. So, and that's her gift. So it's like a gift of a certain status is for me to send you away from our home with a servant. Rebecca had the same thing that happened to her. She was sent, I don't even remember if it gave us a person's name, but she was given a maid servant that went with her as well. That's just the custom that it was. Some women never marry. Some women like live lifelong as a maid. Hagar, same situation with Sarah. She was a maid servant until Sarah gave her to Abraham or Abram at the time. She was just Sarah's servant, and so some women never get married and have children. That was just their position in their hierarchy of how social statuses worked. So verse 25 said, but when Jacob woke up in the morning, it was Leah. Now he was expecting Rachel. There was never a conversation about Leah, never a mention of anything about Leah. So he said, "What have you done to me? I worked 7 years for Rachel. Why have you tricked me?" Now we all know that this is dirty. Laban, in the back of his mind, already had a plan to get Leah married and got Leah married before Rachel because he claims it's not our custom. Hmm. It's not right or wrong, it's just what they do. It's not our custom here to marry off a younger daughter ahead of the firstborn, Laban replied. But wait until the bridal week is over, then we'll give you Rachel too, provided you promise to work another 7 years for me. So Jacob agreed to work 7 more years. A week after Jacob had married Leah, Laban gave him Rachel too. Laban gave Rachel a servant, Bilhah, to be her maid. Same situation. So Jacob slept with Rachel too, and he loved her much more than Leah. He then stayed and worked for Laban the additional 7 years. Hold on, wait a minute. Laban done swindled Jacob out of 14 years of indentured servitude just so he can marry two daughters. Now, initially, the agreement was I work for 7 years and I get the younger daughter. He never asked for Leah, never conversation never came up. Laban never made mention of customs until after the fact. So you mean to tell me that you're gonna switch it up and you're gonna tell me that this is y'all's custom to do, and I can have Rachel as long as I work another 7 years? I would have walked away right there. Would have had to walk away right there. But he submitted. He is submitted to the plan that God has. He has not gotten word from his mother or father to return to the land. His assignment essentially is not done there. And so, because he understands custom and he understands probably grace and just like the way that it could work out in his on his behalf, instead of getting all upset continuously, he had got upset for the moment, but he could still have Rachel. This time, though, he would get to marry Rachel 1 week after he married Leah. So essentially, he married Leah this week. The next week, after the bridal week is over, right? Bridal week is like a honeymoon. After the bridal week is over, Rachel, you can have Rachel. But I'm going to go ahead and give you Rachel, but now you do owe me another 7 years. So it's something that he agreed to, I think, because he could get Rachel right away, and he still needed to grow and build and live. He hadn't gotten word. He was submitted to the plan. Remember, God already promised him. See, you can be submitted to something when you know what the end game is. When you know that there's a promise on the other end, you might not know how it's going to work out, when it's going to work out, but you know that there's an end game, you can be submitted. Just like we could be submitted to God's plan because we know the end game is salvation. I don't have to worry about the in between day to day things because I can be submitted, knowing that this is how God moves. This is who He is. This is who He has told me He is. This is the promise He has given me. It's in His written word. It's in His verbal word. It's there. That is how Jacob is operating in his mind. Now, a lot of people will say like, "Oh, this was payback for the deceit that he did with Esau and Isaac." And I think that that situation was completely different because everybody in that household knew that Jacob was supposed to be the promised son anyway. He was supposed to be the one to receive the blessing. They knew that before he was born, but Isaac sought to give favor where he wanted to give favor. And so in order to have how God wanted it to work out happen, that deceit was necessary. I don't necessarily look at it as far as Laban tricking him and saying that that's the same thing. You could look at it that way. I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong to. I just say I don't really look at it that way. It's like eye for an eye. I don't really think it was that same level. I think it was just, yes, Laban was deceitful and manipulative, so he was getting something out of it. And he may have known also that, hey, Jacob is in love with Rachel. Rachel, Jacob would have never said yes to having to marry Leah first and then Rachel because he doesn't understand our customs and he doesn't understand our ways. So he felt like he needed to deceive him in order to get that. So, okay, Laban, this time it probably ended up being okay because Jacob was like, okay, two wives. Now they weren't opposed to that because it's common as well. He wasn't necessarily looking for it, but his heart and he was in love with Rachel. So he probably couldn't even see because he was just so in love. He probably just could not even see and imagine having to do any other way. But this was the way it needed to work out. And sometimes that's part of submission is just accepting how it's working out and what's going on, despite it not being your intentions. It might be the best though for the situation. So that's a part of submission as well. All right, so we got Jacob married to two people within a 7 year period, but within 2 weeks of each other, really. But it took 7 years for him to earn them. Now he got to work 7 more years. So now we know that that is 14 years total because you got to add 7 plus 7. I told y'all that Jacob was at minimum 40 years old when he left and came to Haran. At this point, we're talking about a 55-year-old. If he had to do 7 plus 7, but in that time, this is what happened. He starts to have children within that time period. So he's about almost 50, I would say, when he probably gets married. And so then he starts having kids. The Lord saw that Leah was unloved. He enabled her to have children, but Rachel could not conceive. I always think that that's so interesting because we know that God is in control. And when we see something like that, sometimes we think that that's not fair. Like, how come Rachel couldn't have children, but Leah could? Well, Leah, although she didn't have that same sparkle, she could still have favor. I think that there's always like multiple lessons to things. She could still have favor. She may not have felt like she was as beautiful as Rachel, her sister, but she still had something to offer, and she could still like earn favor from the Lord. So she may have been unloved from her husband. That's really her dad's fault for being unloved. Now, should Jacob have gotten over it? Yes, but he does his duties as a husband, right? But Jacob really should have gotten over it, but Laban should not have set it up to where it would be like that. Because now you're throwing in the older daughter and like making her feel like second scraps. Jacob really don't want her, but he's gonna do what he's supposed to do out of like, obligation. But that's just not a good setup. So, people don't do that. Don't be like Laban. But the Lord favored Leah, even though she was very unloved by her husband, meaning that she wasn't as loved as Rachel, wasn't adored, like they weren't in love. They probably didn't have that much affection. But when it came to, sex and the marriage bed, he honored that. So he enabled her to have children, but Rachel could not conceive. And so that was probably I'm sure, a humbling experience for both of them, both Rachel and Jacob, to experience like, we're not having children. Something is wrong. Something's not up. Something is up. Excuse me. So Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben, for she said, "The Lord has noticed my misery, and now my husband will love me." So I left the footnote in here so we can understand what Reuben means in Hebrew. It means look, a son. It sounds it sounds like the Hebrew for he has seen my misery. So this the word the character spelling of Reuben is what that means. Look, a son. It also means he has seen my misery. Or it sounds like a word that's similar to he has seen my misery. So she is naming these children based on her experiences, and she's understanding that she has been blessed by God to be able to have children. And so she's hoping that now my husband will love me. So her whole pursuit is trying to achieve love. And so I think it's really symbolic of how we try to earn love, and really we just have to submit eventually to it. You'll see what I mean by that. So then she soon became pregnant again and gave birth to another son. So it's like back to back. She named him Simeon, for she said, "The Lord heard that I was unloved and has given me another son." Simeon, in the footnote, it estimates that Simeon probably means one who hears. Okay, so the Lord has heard that I was unloved. So she's again naming these children for her experience. The first one means a son, because the Lord has seen my misery. So he's the God who sees me like Elroy, but notice my misery specifically. And then he is also the Lord who hears, so that's where Simeon comes from. Then she became pregnant a third time and gave birth to another son. He was named Levi, for she said, surely this time my husband will feel affection for me, since I have given him three sons. Now, sons are highly valued, sons are important for your lineage, and so she's the only one that's having children. So you talking about possibly at least 2 to 3 years now of having children for her, and she is trying to earn this affection of her husband. And she's giving him sons, which should seem like she should get more affection. And so Levi sounds like a Hebrew term that means being attached or feeling affection for. So it's all telling her story of her trying to earn this affection. Mind you, the whole time the Lord is blessing her in her womb. It doesn't tell us anything about Rachel. It just says that she could not conceive. So we don't know what's really going on with her during these pregnancies. I'm sure she's tore up. I'm sure it's very emotional. I'm sure it's all of that. But it should be also humbling. Here's Leah trying to earn affection, like so many of us do. And then it says, once again, Leah became pregnant and gave birth to another son. She named him Judah, for she said, now I will praise the Lord. And then she stopped having children. Judah is related to the Hebrew term for praise. So Judah means praise. So finally, after acknowledging that the Lord heard her, after acknowledging that, he has seen her misery, um, after trying to earn this affection and trying to be attached to her son, she finally gives praise, honor, glory to the Lord, which is where it should have been in the first place. But this is a lesson to help teach Leah, I think, about the love that God has for her. And we can praise God for the love that He has for us, despite how other people may treat us, despite what we may experience person to person in our different relationships and our different trials. Who is the one who is important? Whose love is the one that's important? It's really the love of the Lord. Because can't nobody love you like the Lord can love you. People's love is conditional. God's love is unconditional. And that's what He teaches us through His Son, Jesus Christ. And I just love the symbolism that comes in this story when you talk about Leah. And it's like this part of like, now I will praise the Lord. It's, to me, I'm reading it, it's like a similar to a submission that's happening as well. But now she's gonna praise the Lord. Now she submits to praising the Lord, and she stopped having children. That is the end of our lesson for today. That is the end of the chapter 29. And so we're going to pick up next week reading chapter 30. We get to learn more about more children that Jacob has and how all of those things grow. So remember, the story is really focused on Jacob now because he is the blessed one. He also has the birthright. So we're not going to hear much about Esau. We're not going to hear much more about Isaac, Rebecca. Um, but the lineage is there. The spiritual inheritance is there. And so now we get to really dive into Jacob more and more and more. So I'll be excited to come back next week and teach you more and more. Be blessed and drop something in the comments if you enjoyed.